What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here, and in this video, I'm bringing you a build that absolutely wrecks an Onslaught. Of course, all the usual suspects are all very good, like Sunbracer's Warlock with Well of Radiance, Consecration Titan, Strand Melee Titan, Orpheus Rig Hunter, but in this video, I want to bring awareness to a build that is probably flying under a lot of people's radar, and that is the Threadling army build on Strand Warlock. This build allows you to make an absurd amount of Threadlings. Like seriously, it's crazy. And these Threadlings do a lot, and that is because the build is centered around the exotic boots, the Swarmers. They have the exotic intrinsic trait Swarmers. Destroying a tangle spawns a Threadling. Your Threadlings unravel targets that they damage. Now, luckily for you, this week I am releasing my Strand subclass school series, so if you're unfamiliar with some of the terms, or want even more in-depth breakdowns of some of the things I'm talking about, then go watch those videos. But basically, unraveling helps with ad clear. If an enemy is unraveled, they create projectiles as you damage them, and these projectiles seek out targets. So this is just additional damage, and it helps deal damage to big groups of ads, which is perfect for an activity like Onslaught. I did 50 waves on Legend with a couple buddies, and one friend, it was his first time running Legend. He is a good player, but I am saying this to illustrate that this build can certainly pull its weight, as you can see in the background gameplay. So the essence of the build is to create as many Threadlings as possible so that we constantly either have them perched or have them seeking out enemies. So the best way for us to do this is with the aspect Weave Walk. This states dodge while airborne, consume your melee energy and enter the weave, gaining damage resistance from combatants and players. Reactivate your air dodge or cast your rift to exit the weave. While in the weave, your melee energy is drained and you generate perched Threadlings over time. So when you enter this trance state, you can do a lot of awesome things aside from just generating Threadlings. You can carry the spark and dunk it, so Invis Hunters, you aren't the only ones who can cheese their way to an easy dunk in between Onslaught waves. You can also cap zones where things like Briggs may be, or to summon reinforcements in the boss room, so it's extremely valuable. While in Weave Walk, it doesn't last a super long time, so you have to be smart with it. You can only cast it when you have at least one fully charged melee. But the trick is to always try to keep your melee charges between 2 and 3, because the melee actually regens faster from 1 to 2, and then even quicker still from 2 to 3 than it does at base. So try not to use all your melees at once. It will take some getting used to, but this is where the skill gap and build knowledge comes into place. So you definitely want to be aware of this interaction to get the most out of your build. Another awesome thing about Weave Walk is you can use it as a get out of jail free card to escape enemy fire. The enemies in the later stages of Legend Onslaught hit very hard, so it will keep you alive. I even used this on wave 49 when I was last Guardian standing to go get to a safer position away from enemy fire. The one downside to Weave Walk though, is you can't res while you're in an invis state, and you also can't pick up orbs or ammo. The other bad thing about it is the only aspect in the game that gives you only one fragment slot, but trust me, it is worth it. So I got to cover, revive my teammate, and the other teammate resed himself, and then we went on to beat the level 50 wave. So it can definitely come in very clutch in this game mode. The other aspect is Weaver's Call. Cast your rift to weave 3 Threadlings and deploy any Threadlings you have perched. So Threadlings will release as you deal damage to an enemy if you have them perched, but with Weaver's Call, every time you cast a rift, it sends out 3 Threadlings as well as any perched. So if you have 5 perched already, then you'll send out a whopping 8 Threadlings. This is great for taking enemies out right as they spawn. And for enemies that are beefier and don't just outright die to the Threadlings, they will then be unraveled by them because of the Swarmers, so they'll take more damage as you deal damage with your weapons. It's just awesome synergy. For fragments, we only have 3, and they're pretty obvious. We have Thread of Generation to get grenade energy back when we deal damage. Obviously, we are running Threadling grenades with this build, so this just helps us get them that much quicker. The Destiny Data Compendium, which is linked down below, along with the Dim build, states that, as a rule, the more damage something deals, the more energy you get back. So you just want to be cranking out damage and spamming your grenades whenever possible. It does give -10 to discipline, but trust me, it's worth it. The next fragment is another obvious one, Thread of Evolution. Threadlings travel farther and deal additional damage. So this is a 33% damage increase, which is quite significant. And we make tons of Threadlings with this build, so you definitely want to have this on, as it really helps take down the tankier enemies. And the final fragment is Thread of Rebirth. Strand weapon final blows have a chance to create a Threadling. I will get to the weapons shortly, but when I dreamt up this build, it definitely revolved around Strand weapons and making Threadlings from final blows with them. This works on a timer, so every 3 strand weapon kills on red bars you will make a Threadling. But if you kill a mini boss or boss, it will automatically make a Threadling. And this can stack with the weapon perk Hatchling as well, so on a kill, you could make 2 Threadlings at once. So this seems like a good time to talk about the weapons. And this is where the build can really deviate because I don't expect everyone to have the weapons that I used. But if you do, they shine tremendously in this build. So in the top slot, I have a fusion rifle with Discord and Hatchling. Hatchling works exactly like Thread of Rebirth with a counter, so 3 fusion rifle kills on red bars will make a Threadling. But if you used a precision weapon, then it would make a Threadling on every precision weapon final blow as well. But obviously you can't hit crits with a fusion. I grinded Iron Banner like crazy for this roll when it came out. I remember my friend Baker got it on like his first drop, and I had to do multiple Iron Banner resets. But I'm very glad I did because I finally found a build to use it with. Next, I was going to use Tessellation for the grenade energy it gives, but I quickly found out that this thing is pretty weak. I wasn't a fan. So I switched to Buried Bloodline and it worked amazingly. It's a special sidearm, but it has pretty good ammo economy. So we could get a few kills with this to proc Devour, and once we have Devour, it ups our survivability tremendously, and Devour also gives us grenade energy as we get kills. So this was actually better in like every way than Tessellation. And then when we have Devour active, every enemy we shoot will get weakened, so that really helps out on the high health enemies. This weapon is truly impressive, I honestly love it so much, but it is a dungeon exotic, so I understand not everyone will have it, but you can see why it is so good in this build. If you don't have one, maybe use something like Exderis which can blind enemies and also has decent ammo economy, or just use an exotic primary that you like. Totally up to you. Quicksilver Storm's always a good option, and it can make tangles as well, which synergizes with this build. But back to my gameplay loop, I would try and proc Devour with Buried Bloodline, and then use the Fusion Rifle as ad clear. Discord means it doesn't really lose any ammo as long as we get kills with it, and we make Threadlings as we do so. So I was always trying to proc Discord before I used it, because double special builds can be a little sketchy to run nowadays. But with this loadout in particular, I never ran low on ammo. Especially because in Onslaught, you get rally flags and weapon crates. So now that brings us to the heavy slot, where again, many people may not have this weapon. So again, when I first made the build, I was going to use a Mercado 45 with Demolitionist and Hatchling. And you can see how those 2 perks would be absolutely awesome in this build. But after playing some Onslaught, I quickly realized you need some heavier hitting weapons. So with the special weapons that I was running, it didn't really make sense to have a machine gun, which is another ad clear weapon. I already had ad clear well covered with the fusion and sidearm, not to mention the copious amounts of Threadlings, so I decided to go with an Envious Assassin and bait and switch Cataphract GL3. Now, many of you may not have this weapon or this role, but if you do, I can say that it works wonders throughout all of Onslaught. It's great for the bosses, it's great for the high health targets, and it's even good for ad clear. But if you wanted, you could run a well-rolled edge transit here, and that would do well also. And it would also have Void Weapon Surge synergy with Buried Bloodline. But yeah, it really comes down to what weapons you have. I just give the framework of the build. But yeah, the Cataphract with this roll goes crazy. Huge burst damage, and it even pairs with the artifact mods that I will talk about next. So on the artifact, we obviously want to run Anti-Barrier Sidearm for the Buried Bloodline, but we also need the 2 strand perks in the last 2 columns. Unraveling Orbs gives our weapons unraveling rounds when we pick up an Orb of Power. My teammates were a Consecration Titan and a Well Warlock, so I was always getting orbs from the well for damage, so then I could unravel the target when I was doing damage. And in Onslaught, there are tons of orbs just in general, so you have this up a lot, which is why I like the Strand GL so much, because I'm fully kitted into unraveling everything. And then we have Horde Shuttle. Damaging unraveled targets with a weapon spawns a Threadling. So this is just yet another source of Threadlings. It's absolutely ridiculous how many Threadlings we make on this build. And I also threw on Blast Radius from the artifact just for a way to get charged with light easily. For mods, on the helmet we have Ashes to Assets for more super energy on grenade kills. Can anyone tell me for sure if this works for all Threadling kills or just grenade Threadling kills? I don't know, but I'm guessing it's only Threadling grenade kills. And then I also have Heavy Ammo Finder and Harmonic Siphon. On the arms, I had Firepower to create an orb with a grenade final blow. Now I know that this only works with Threadling grenades because I was able to test it. And then we have Momentum Transfer for melee energy when we deal damage with a grenade, and Bolstering Detonation for class ability when we deal damage with a grenade. And again, I ask you, does this work with all Threadlings or just the Threadling grenades? Regardless, they're great to run because of how many grenades we get in general with this build. On the chest piece, I run the rainbow of Arc, Solar, and Void Resist. Concussive Dampener is not really needed in my opinion because you do not want to get close to enemies in Onslaught, and if you do, you're probably dead anyways. I know it has other benefits for things like Night Blasts, but yeah, I like the elemental resists in Onslaught. On the legs, I had Recuperation for a chunk of health when I pick up an orb, and then Invigoration and Innervation for melee and grenade energy when I pick up an orb. This is the best for having the most optimal ability uptime, which was my intention when I designed the build, but for Onslaught in particular, in the future I would maybe run one Strand Surge. I think I would get more use out of that. I'm not exactly sure which mod I would drop, but yeah, a Strand Surge would also be great here. And then on the class item, I had Outreach, Bomber, and Distribution. This will reduce my grenade and melee cooldowns when I cast the Rift, and if I cast it near enemies, then Distribution gives all your abilities a little bit of a bump, including your super. For stats, this is one of the rare times I recommend speccing into some strength, just because Weave Walk is directly tied to your melee ability being charged. I have another Swarmers build where I can get 100 Rezeal, 90 Recovery, and 100 Discipline, but I actually reworked the stats for this build in particular just to get my strength up. As a result, the recovery suffers, but this isn't the end of the world. I only died a couple times on this Onslaught run, and I don't think Recov would have helped me anyways. It would be nice for a quicker Rift cooldown, don't get me wrong, but you can still send out your perched Threadlings just by shooting enemies. Therefore, I recommend 100 Resilience of course, and then 100 Discipline for easy Threadling grenades, and then try to get 50 Strength at least. This is what I had, and it worked very well. I never really found that I was super low on melee energy. In fact, I often had all three up and I'd be like, oops, I'm not being optimal. Time to Weave Walk and perch some Threadlings. Again, I would pretty much always cast it when I had 3 charges and let it drain right down to 2 charges, which would give me 5 Threadlings. And then I would cancel it. You get double the regen charge time from 2 to 3, so yeah, always try and do it that way. I think I threw my Arcane Needle out as a melee maybe once the entire run. You really don't want to waste your melee on adds. It's far more beneficial to use it to proc Weave Walk. So with everything that I put into this build, I really wanted to try and illustrate how to use it to its max potential. Because if you can, it's honestly great. Aside from my teammates dying on wave 49, we were never really in too much trouble on our entire run. Granted, my teammates are really good, but this build was more than holding its own. I was extremely impressed with how good it was. The unraveling it creates is excellent on high health targets and for ad clear. The only downside is there is no overload or unstop with my weapon setup. We were on Midtown, so we didn't have overloads to worry about, and I just relied on my teammates for unstoppable ogres. Barrier Knights I could melt down with ease though, thanks to anti-barrier sidearm and the unraveling rounds. So yeah, you may have to tailor your weapon selection a little differently than mine depending which Onslaught you're running, but the setup of this build goes hard regardless of the weapons. And that is going to do it for the build. If you're still here, then thanks so much for watching to the end. I strongly encourage you to give this build a try for yourself. It is so much fun seeing green just litter the battlefield. And like I mentioned earlier, if you don't know much about Strand, then check out my Strand subclass school videos for in-depth breakdowns of everything the subclass has to offer. Good luck in Onslaught, and take care.